They kicked an elderly dishwasher off a private medical shuttle because she didn't look like she belonged. What they didn't know, she built the AI keeping their hospital alive. It began on a rainy Tuesday morning, gray skies pressing down on the city like a warning. The kind of day where small cruelties feel sharper. At 6:42 a.m., the executive shuttle of Northbridge Medical Systems idled at a private stop reserved for board members, high-ranking doctors, and VIP guests. Gleaming black exterior, tinted windows, polished chrome. Inside, the leather seats still smelled like money. Then she stepped on, wearing a faded wool coat, frayed at the cuffs. Her shoes, functional, rubber-soled, still wet from the puddles outside. 60-something, hair pulled into a loose bun. Her name was Alma Jones. She moved with quiet efficiency, head slightly bowed, hands folded over a small canvas tote. No makeup, no jewelry. A pair of cheap reading glasses hung from her neck by a chain. Silence swept through the shuttle like a dropped curtain. A sharply dressed man in the third row coughed into his designer scarf. Two junior executives exchanged glances. One raising a sculpted brow. And in the back seat, Dr. Gregory Vance, Northbridge's youngest board member, stared at Alma as if she'd tracked mud through a museum. "What's she doing here?" someone whispered. "She's not staff. Not this staff," another replied. The shuttle attendant, a woman in her 20s wearing Northbridge's signature silver and blue uniform, approached Alma with a brittle smile. "Ma'am, this shuttle is for Northbridge administrative executives and specialist partners only. Can I ask how you got access?" Alma calmly produced a white ID badge from her coat pocket. "I have clearance," she said softly. The badge was genuine. The scanner beeped. A green light flashed. But perception outweighed proof. "She's a dishwasher," Dr. Vance said flatly, standing up. "She works in nutrition. She's not entitled to this shuttle." "She's with facilities," someone added. "This is a reserved transport." Alma didn't argue. She simply sat down, folded her hands, and stared out the window, unbothered. The attendant stood frozen. The other passengers began to murmur, their discontent growing. Dr. Vance took out his phone. "If Northbridge has lost its screening standards, I'll escalate this. We have reputations to protect." What no one knew, not the whispering executives, not the smirking board member, not the girl in the silver uniform, was that Alma Jones, the so-called dishwasher, wasn't just a cleaning lady. She was the lead engineer behind Sentinel, the proprietary AI triage system that Northbridge had licensed for $72 million. A system credited with saving over 30,000 lives annually. A system with a vulnerability only she knew how to patch. Alma had built the brain of their hospital, and now they were trying to kick her off a shuttle. She didn't need their seat, but they were about to need her. Alma Jones had worked at Northbridge Medical Systems for 27 years. She had no framed diplomas lining her walls, no LinkedIn profile, no press coverage. But if you asked the hospital's servers, data centers, or operating room dashboards who kept them alive, they'd whisper her name. She lived in a rent-controlled apartment on the south side, in a building with peeling paint and neighbors who left thank-you notes on her door whenever she fixed their routers or restored lost phone data. Every morning, Alma walked 3 blocks to catch the early train. She'd ride it with construction workers, nursing aides, and janitors, people whose names never showed up on hospital donor walls, but without whom the building wouldn't function. To the staff at Northbridge, Alma was simply Miss Alma from Facilities. No one ever asked what she actually did in the sub-basement office with the locked door and 7 monitors. No one asked why IT always called her directly when the surgical AI froze, or why she had keys to the AI diagnostics lab that even senior engineers didn't possess. She didn't mind. She'd learned long ago that the quiet ones were often the most underestimated. Alma had started her career fixing vending machines at a tech firm in the 1980s. A senior developer noticed her tinkering with the internal logic board and gave her a used Unix manual. Within a year, she was building decision trees and early neural nets for small automation systems. But when layoffs came, titles didn't save her. Only skin color and assumptions doomed her to roles beneath her ability. Still, Alma kept learning. In nights lit by secondhand lamps and screens flickering with code, she mastered Python, machine learning, and medical informatics. She took side gigs fixing MRI databases for hospitals that never bothered to ask how she knew so much. Eventually, she landed at Northbridge. They needed someone technical but quiet to keep the AI humming without asking for raises or attention. She was perfect. She never wore the white coats or scrubs, just her dark blue work vest and a clip-on badge. She blended in, by choice, because blending in meant freedom. Freedom to build, to observe, to plan. But on that shuttle, under the eyes of Northbridge's elite, her quiet became suspicion. Dr. Gregory Vance, the epitome of entitlement in a tailored blazer, had never spoken to her before that day. To him, she was invisible until she violated his image of belonging. And now, he was preparing to escalate the incident to HR, unaware that Alma had built the triage logic that had saved his wife's life 2 years ago when her appendix ruptured. The hospital's culture ran on quiet hierarchies. Surgeons at the top, nurses beneath them, techs in the shadows, and facilities staff in the margins. Alma had lived in those margins by design. But the shuttle confrontation cracked something open. She wasn't just overlooked. She was erased. And now, for the first time in decades, Alma wasn't content to stay quiet. The shuttle came to a halt outside Northbridge's main tower. Rain tapped against the windows in a soft rhythm, the kind that usually calmed Alma. But today, it sounded like a countdown. The silence inside the vehicle was sharp, tense. "Ma'am?" the shuttle attendant said again, her voice tighter now, more rehearsed. "I need you to step off. The board has reserved this vehicle for executive transport only. There's another shuttle coming shortly for, facility staff." She didn't look Alma in the eye. Alma didn't move. She looked down at her lap, where her fingers rested against her canvas bag. Her ID badge still blinked green on the small panel beside her seat. Verified. Valid, but not accepted. Dr. Gregory Vance stood fully now. "This is absurd," he said. "We can't have confusion like this. What if press saw this? What does it say when we blur the lines between staff and specialists?" He said blur the lines the way some people say contaminate. One of the younger executives, Jacob from Health Partnerships, glanced toward Alma and then quickly looked away. He knew her, had once seen her debugging a broken interface when the hospital's entire ICU tracking system went offline. But now, surrounded by power and whispers, he said nothing. "Greg, maybe we just ride," a woman in a gray skirt suit offered cautiously. "We're already running behind." "No," Dr. Vance snapped. "There are protocols for a reason. This isn't about one ride, it's about maintaining standards." A word that hung in the air like a slap. Standards. Alma finally looked up, her gaze settling. Not on Vance, but on the shuttle attendant, who now stood awkwardly, eyes darting to the rain outside. Alma's voice, when it came, was soft. "I scanned in. My ID is valid. I was cleared by security. But," the attendant said, almost in a whisper. "You're not the type who usually rides this shuttle." And there it was. Not policy, not a real breach, just not the type. That's what this was about. Not rules, not comfort, image. One of the interns chuckled under his breath. Did she think this was for everyone? No one stopped him. Another executive pulled out their phone and began texting. Someone else muttered, "Why doesn't she just take the next one?" Alma felt the heat crawl up her neck, the kind that comes not from shame, but from remembering every moment like this that had come before. Every door she'd held open for people who never thanked her. Every system she'd fixed without recognition. Every moment, her brilliance had been labeled support work. She stood slowly, not because she was yielding, but because she knew a storm was coming, and sometimes storms begin with silence. As she exited into the rain, the shuttle doors hissed shut behind her. The vehicle drove off toward the main tower, carrying the comfortable and the complicit. No one said a word. Alma's coat grew heavier with each drop of rain, but inside, something lighter began to stir. Not anger, not yet. Something sharper. Resolve. By 8:15 a.m., Alma was back in her subterranean office, 3 floors beneath Northbridge's glossy atrium, where sunlight never reached and few ever ventured. The room was small, windowless, cluttered with wires and blinking servers. At the center sat her workstation, an array of curved monitors casting a soft blue glow across her face. The walls, lined with circuit boards and sticky notes, bore no titles, no credentials, just brilliance disguised as routine. She removed her damp coat, hung it on a nail by the door, and sat down. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she opened a folder on her desktop labeled Sentinel Logs, Root Access. The Sentinel AI system was Northbridge's crown jewel, a diagnostic engine used by 83 hospitals nationwide. It detected organ failure, predicted sepsis, and even optimized surgical schedules based on machine learning. It had cut ER wait times by 42% in 6 months. Alma had written the original algorithms in a battered composition notebook 15 years ago. Only 4 people in the world understood the system's real architecture. Only one person could access its ethical override protocols. That person had been told to get off a shuttle because she didn't look the part. Alma didn't touch anything sensitive. Not yet. Instead, she began to quietly document. She opened a new folder. Shuttle Incident, May 7th. She uploaded the footage from the shuttle's interior cam, a stream she had access to as part of her security diagnostics role. Audio, video, timestamps. Every look, every word. She clipped the segment where Dr. Vance said, "Blur the lines," and where the attendant murmured, "Not the type." She exported it silently. Next, she drafted a single email. To Clara Monroe, Northbridge's chief ethics officer, a woman Alma had only met once at an employee recognition luncheon where Clara mispronounced her name and moved on. Subject, request for policy review, discriminatory incident. In the body, Alma wrote plainly, she described the shuttle incident, attached her badge scan data, included the footage, and asked a single question. Are our standards protecting the institution, or just the image of who we think belongs? She hit send. No fanfare, no announcement. Then she opened another tab. Alma had once built a backdoor to Sentinel's learning module, a gate only she could open, created to monitor bias creep in emergency diagnostics. The code was clean, ethical, legal, and invisible to anyone else. She checked it now. The system had flagged 37 recent triage cases where income or racial metadata had influenced urgency assignments. She exported that too. Not to expose, not yet, but to prepare. By 9 a.m., Alma was back in the cafeteria line, grabbing coffee like nothing had happened. Staff waved. No one knew what she was setting in motion beneath the hospital's polished floors. Upstairs, Dr. Vance was presenting quarterly outcomes to a boardroom, unaware that the woman he dismissed had just looped the ethics department, HR, and a civil rights watchdog group into one quiet email thread. Alma didn't yell. She didn't demand. She documented. She moved data. And she waited. The reckoning wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. By Wednesday morning, the whisper began. It started in IT, always the canary in the corporate mine. A technician named Rami noticed a surge in access logs from Alma's terminal. Not unusual until he saw the destination folders. Sentinel Core, Ethics Alert, and an external watchdog group tagged Equity Med Legal Consortium. Within an hour, the logs were circulating in hushed Slack threads titled, "Who is Alma Jones?" By noon, Clara Monroe, the chief ethics officer, sat bolt upright at her desk, rereading Alma's email for the third time. The attached footage hit hard, but the final line hit harder. Please review with urgency, as this may constitute systemic pattern exposure under Clause 8.14 of our AI Accountability Agreement. Clause 8.14. Only one person in the company had the authority to invoke it, a principal engineer or contract authority with system authorship credentials. Alma had both. She wasn't just a technician. She was the original architect of Sentinel, her name buried deep in the metadata of every deployment license, and she still retained intellectual property rights to the AI's ethical governance module, rights that Northbridge had never fully bought out. By 2 p.m., legal was in full panic mode. By 3 p.m., the chief technology officer, Denise Fallon, received an emergency briefing. "Wait," she said, her voice thinning. "Alma Jones? From facilities? You're telling me she owns the Sentinel logic?" "No," her advisor corrected. "She is the Sentinel logic." Across the executive suites, faces paled. Contracts were pulled, fine print reread. A clause, previously seen as ceremonial, now pulsed with lethal clarity. In the event of ethical breach, the original system author may suspend operations for review without board consent. If Alma activated the clause, she could initiate a lockdown of Sentinel across every Northbridge facility. A silent kill switch. Not permanent, but long enough to trigger national attention and investor panic. Meanwhile, in the employee lounge, the Shuttle video had begun to circulate. A nurse shared it on a private Facebook group for Black healthcare workers. A junior admin posted it on Reddit. By 6 p.m., it had landed on a healthcare watchdog Twitter account with 20,000 followers. "Northbridge execs kick off cleaning lady who built their AI system. You can't make this up." Hashtags erupted. Sentinel silenced. AI architect erased. Who is Alma Jones? That evening, Dr. Gregory Vance sat at his penthouse desk, reviewing his inbox. Over a dozen messages flagged the Shuttle incident. Several executives had forwarded the video, along with Alma's credentials. "Greg," one message read, "did you seriously try to remove the lead AI engineer from the Shuttle? Legal's losing its mind." Another came from a board member. "Her name's on the patent. She owns part of the framework." Vance's stomach sank. The woman he'd sneered at for tracking in rainwater now held the keys to Northbridge's most valuable system. He remembered her face. Not angry, not shaken. Just still. Like a loaded spring. He had underestimated her. They all had. Now the woman in the frayed coat was about to teach them what silence really sounds like, when it speaks through systems they no longer control. By Thursday morning, Northbridge Medical Systems was in free fall. The shuttle footage had gone viral, first on Reddit, then Twitter, then TikTok. News outlets picked it up within hours. The headline on CNN read, "AI pioneer removed from shuttle at her own hospital." Discrimination or corporate blindness? By noon, Alma's name was trending globally. In downtown Chicago, where Northbridge's corporate headquarters overlooked the lake, the atmosphere had turned from tense to apocalyptic. PR scrambled to draft a response, but each hour brought new revelations. Alma's patent record surfaced, verifying her as co-creator and ethical custodian of Sentinel. A leaked internal memo showed she still retained conditional authority to suspend the system. Investors reacted with fury. One hedge fund managing $220 million in Northbridge equity issued a 24-hour ultimatum: fire the executives involved or we pull out. A pension board in California froze its funding allocation. By 3 p.m., stock prices dropped 11%. Inside the company's HR office, a quiet mutiny began. Employees, some of whom had walked past Alma for years, without a glance, now forwarded private messages of support. A senior ER nurse wrote, "She saved my patient when Sentinel flagged an internal bleed our machines missed, and we let her be treated like a janitor." Anonymous testimonies flooded the ethics hotline. "I saw Dr. Vance mock Alma during a board review last year. Lauren from PR said she didn't look executive enough to speak at the AI summit. I worked in facilities. Alma helped redesign our scheduling AI, and none of us knew it was her idea." In the break room, someone printed out Alma's photo and pinned it beside a sign that used to read, "Employee of the Month." Someone had scribbled below, "Employee of the Decade." Gregory Vance was removed from public appearances by the board. He issued a private apology through legal, vague, non-committal, but screenshots of his earlier email dismissing the incident leaked anyway. "This isn't a race issue. She just didn't fit the shuttle profile." His words became a meme. Shuttle profile trended on TikTok with duets of people reenacting Alma's quiet defiance. But this wasn't just about Vance. The entire executive structure began to crack. Clara Monroe, chief ethics officer, was suspended pending review. Denise Fallon, the CTO, faced mounting calls to explain why Alma had never been properly credited, despite being listed as a consultant for years. Northbridge's board called an emergency session. Alma did not attend. She didn't have to. Her presence now filled every corner of the institution, from HR audits to the servers powering Sentinel to the uneasy hush in every C-suite conversation. Hospitals across the country began asking questions, too. Who's really designing our systems? Who gets credit? Who gets erased? And in homes across America, young women of color in STEM sat up a little straighter, watching Alma's story unfold. She hadn't shouted. She hadn't stormed stages. She had simply stood, endured, recorded, and reminded the world that brilliance doesn't need permission to belong. Northbridge had built a tower on borrowed genius, and now the foundation was shaking. 6 weeks later, the lobby of Northbridge Medical Systems looked different. The polished marble floors remained. The cascading sculpture still shimmered under the atrium's skylight. But something deeper had shifted. Something not visible in the architecture, but in the atmosphere. The plaque near the entrance had been replaced. Where once there had been a sterile inscription about innovation and excellence, now stood a new engraving. In honor of Alma Jones, for building what others could not see. She hadn't approved it. In fact, she hadn't even attended the unveiling. Her absence was intentional. Alma never needed a spotlight. What she cared about was happening behind the scenes. The Ethics Committee now reported directly to an independent oversight board. Every algorithm across Northbridge's AI systems was being audited, not just for efficiency, but for fairness. Alma had partnered with engineers from historically black colleges and women's tech collectives to redesign Sentinel's triage interface with a human dignity overlay, a feature that would prioritize equity over perceived value. More importantly, hiring practices were rewritten. Attribution protocols were enforced. Credit, once hoarded by the loudest voices in the boardroom, was now traceable, transparent. And those who had stood in her way? Dr. Vance submitted his resignation. His name disappeared from the executive site with a quiet footnote. He had tried to survive the storm, but you can't outpace a truth that's everywhere. Some said he took a teaching position out of state. Others said he'd gone quiet, lost in thought. Perhaps that was its own justice. Denise Fallon remained, but different. She reached out to Alma with a candid video message. Not a PR move, but a plea for guidance. "I failed to see you," she said. "If you'll allow it, I'd like to listen now." Alma didn't respond immediately. When she did, it was with a question, not a rebuke. "What systems have you built? And whom did they exclude?" The response marked the beginning of a working partnership. Not friendship, but something rarer in corporate America. Mutual respect. Outside the hospital, Alma became a symbol, not of scandal, but of quiet power. Universities invited her to speak. Panels begged for her insights. She accepted few, but mentored many. Young women of color in computer science began signing their code AJ, a tribute to the woman who reminded them they didn't need to shout to be undeniable. And Sarah Lee, a recent Northbridge intern who'd witnessed the Shuttle incident, wrote an op-ed in The Atlantic titled, "The Day I Saw a System Flinch." It ended with a single line. Alma didn't break the system. She made it look in the mirror. On a gray morning, much like the one when it all began, Alma rode a different shuttle. This time, no one questioned her presence. She sat by the window watching the skyline drift by. In her hand was no badge, no contract, just a worn paperback book and a quiet smile. She had not yelled, she had not begged. She had simply reminded the world what it owed the people it forgets. And as the shuttle slowed to a stop, she stood, not taller than before, not louder, but unmistakably seen.